and many franchises are that way, right? Like go buy McDonald's today and then try to innovate the business model. Good freaking luck. Right?
Good luck,
Like they've got it down to a science. All the innovation has been done. Like you probably don't have, unless you're a, massively large multi-unit franchisee with thousands of locations, you probably don't have a lot of pull in terms of how things are done, but it does not have to be that way. You get in with a younger emerging brand, they're looking to their franchisees to help them innovate and, continue to help, build the system. So let's talk about the kind of the combination of types of businesses that you guys have, had and still have, in your kind of portfolio. So you started with Shelf Genie. I think you mentioned earlier that some of the other options you guys looked at were also franchises like Shelf Genie is. But then you currently have non-franchise businesses as well. So were you and Jeff very specific in the beginning that you wanted to start with a franchise, or were you open and it just kind of happened that a couple of franchises piqued your interest?
So it's a great question. So if you saw me sitting in franchising class at Babson, I walked out of that class. I was like, there's no chance in hell I'm going to be owning a franchise. I would never let somebody tell me what I got to do, when I got to do, how much I have to pay them off of everything I do. Yeah. But never say never, right? Because I ended up owning 2 franchises. But it all depends. It all depends on if it's the right situation for you, right?
Totally.
The Shelf Genie was the right time, right place, right type of structure for Jeff and I, because we were very engaged. We were launching this phase of our career. Shelf Genie was still very young. We were new into the system. We had a lot of influence with our backgrounds, and we helped shape a lot of the Shelf Genie things today. Like if you look at the dashboard on Shelf Genie, countless nights and days I remember working with the team there to say, no, this should be this should say this, no, you need this widget, you don't need that widget because this is important, this is not important. So, and and Jeff, of course, on the sales side and the financial side of it. But that was very attractive to us.
Yeah,
we liked being engaged and enjoyed helping build something.
Well, it's entrepreneurial. It's that same startup feel that attracted you to, helping build a new division at Capital One, to the Shop Link. And I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people think of franchises the way you did when you were sitting in that class in college, where it's, this very rigid, model where you have little to no autonomy as the owner. And many franchises are that way, right? Like go buy McDonald's today and then try to innovate the business model. Good freaking luck. Right? Good luck, like they've got it down to a science. All the innovation has been done. Like you probably don't have, unless you're a, massively large multi-unit franchisee with thousands of locations, you probably don't have a lot of pull in terms of how things are done, but it does not have to be that way. You get in with a younger emerging brand, they're looking to their franchisees to help them innovate and, continue to help, build the system. And, the other thing I'll just mention there, because this is something I talk about with people so much when it comes to pros and cons of franchises. Most people balk at the fees, at first glance, right? Well, why would I own a franchise when I got to pay these fees up front? I got to pay these ongoing fees. Again, it's very formulaic, right? You've got to understand, yes, what does it cost me to be a franchisee? But what am I getting in exchange for that? And Shelf Genie's evolved a lot over the years, but if we use that as an example, I would argue that especially when you guys got in, you were coming out net better even after the royalties than you would if you guys would have said, all right, we want to start Jeff and Raffi's custom pull-out shelving company, because they already had manufacturing, high quality custom product. Yeah, you're paying 7% or whatever back to them, but you're probably saving what, 15-20% on your cost of goods. You don't have a middleman that's marking product up,
and you don't have to have the process. You don't have to have a person deciding on it,
or all the time that it takes to build that out, right? So anyways, just wanted to kind of point that out. And again, I'll say on the flip side of that, there's tons of franchises out there where you're definitely probably not coming out net better because you're a franchisee, right? The fees are eating you alive. So you got to do the research. But I think
you got to do the research. You got to really understand the business. You got to really, like, McDonald's franchise works for some people, right? If they want to walk in and basically follow the script, it's not me. Like, that's not me. I'm a white space guy. I like to build stuff. I like to make things from nothing. That's my strength, So, and so that worked. And Jeff's strength is he wants to put the numbers behind it and show, and very good dynamic. Like, very easy to get caught in the weeds, even till today, right? I'll go forward for a second. Like, a couple of times when we had some issues with particular jobs in the closet, and we're like, we got to go back, we got to redo this, we got to redo that. And I'm, from an operations perspective, I can't believe it, we're going to lose this money. And then Jeff will pull me aside and be like, look, even you going back, even your time, even the material, we're still making X on this job. He's like, so the margins are in there. So 1 out of 30, 40, 50 that have to go back for, it's okay. But on the average, that's why you got to know your numbers. Like, if you said, what's one thing you can, if you say, Raffi, give me 2 pieces of advice, I'd say, number one, you have to know your numbers and manage your business by the numbers. Number one, unequivocally, hands down, not even anything else.
Yeah.
2, 100%. I would say, it is the decisions you make when times are excellent that is going to dictate how well you do when times are bad. And this is a quote I learned at Capital One from the CEO of Capital One when the whole 09 financial turmoil was happening. And he got on, and this Capital One stock was like $8. And he's like, we're going to be fine because we made great decisions when times were great. A lot of companies made really bold investments, and when times are great, they leverage, they overextend, and then times are bad now, and they can't float it.
Yeah, and those not so great decisions catch up and come back to bite them. But I like that a lot. I mean, 100% agree. Got to know your numbers, manage by the numbers, 100%. But I hadn't heard that second point laid out that way before. The decisions you make when times are excellent will dictate how things go when times are bad.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Rich Fairbanks. I'll quote Rich Fairbanks.
Okay. Rich Fairbanks. Yeah. Current CEO, former CEO?
I'm not sure if he definitely started Capital One, and he was a CEO for.
So he's probably like chairman of the board or something.
Yeah,
like that
definitely. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, like, I talked to some kids at Babson about, they're like, oh, how'd you do that? There's also a people factor. Being able to attract, retain, train, develop people. That's a very important part of
I would argue success. It's the hardest part of any business.
The hardest part, especially now.
Yeah. Yeah, because in my line of work these days, I'm coaching a lot of people through this process of possibly buying a franchise. And, I can't tell you how many times I hear, someone that's been off researching a couple of franchises I've recommended to them come back like, Wes, I love this, and this about the business, but I think it's going to be really hard to find and keep good people. And I'm like, yeah, it will be, but it's not anything that's unique to that business, it's any business out there.
Yeah,
I'm of the opinion that will be the hardest part of it. So learning that is absolutely critical. How did you guys, because you guys have done a good job with that, and I know it hasn't been perfect. You've had, challenges, but from what I've observed, I would say you guys have done a good job with that over time. How would you say you and Jeff have, developed your skill set, if you will, when it comes to finding and keeping good people?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Again, couple things in that. One of them is our culture, right? We're a home improvement company, but we have a pretty cool culture, I think. We have values. We post our values. During interview, we talk about our values. At each of our year-end and mid-year evaluations, which are written up, we talk about our values, and we, especially me with the production guys, I tie everything back to the values, right? So one, it's easier for me to do that because then I say, hey, it's my value, it's not me. The values are dictating.
Blame the values. It's not my fault.
It's not my problem.
But they were smart. They'd be like, yeah, but who wrote the values,
Raffi? Who wrote the values? And that's something we learned at Capital One, by the way, values. And then our values, I'll tell you, the number one is focused on customers. The second one is our culture and our team. The third one is feedback. We're an open feedback company. Again, that goes back to Capital One. And it was very different for home improvement guys to walk into a place when they're expecting to get yelled at, screamed at, thrown a hammer at.
Yeah.
When somebody says, hey, let's go inside. Here's a cup of coffee. Yeah. Let's talk about this situation, how we can make it better. First of all, it takes a couple months because they're like, when's he going to hit me? When's he going to hit me? You know,
or when's he going to screw me over and I'm not going to get my paycheck?
When's it coming?
Yeah.
But when it doesn't, and you break that out of them a little bit after 6 months, 8 months, a year, and a couple of situations happen, then you get to the point where they're like, wow, I do have a great job, great paying job with a good company that cares about me, that cares about to me, one of the values is family first. And afterwards says, my family is no more important than your family, right? Just because if you have to go take your daughter to school, we'll figure out a way to get your daughter to school. Yeah. If you want, a couple installers come in late on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that's huge because they want to drop their kids off at school. And to me, that's tremendously valuable. And they take that, or we shut down between Christmas and New Year's, and we pay the guys, right? To say, take the time back, spend it with your families, recharge, come back, do another good year. Or we don't work Saturdays. From day one, I told Jeff, we're not going to do Saturdays. We're not going to install on Saturday unless there's a snowstorm or we messed up or something happened.
Which for guys in that type of industry, that's not the norm, right? They're working Saturdays. They're probably got people asking them to work Sundays on a pretty regular basis. Yep. So I'm curious because it sounds like you guys learned a lot of this from Capital One, or at least the importance of having values,
the values and the culture,
and actually talking about them and living them, not just it's a poster on a wall and nothing more than that. So did you guys, from the very beginning, put a lot of this into practice? I'm sure as the businesses have grown, as the teams have grown, it's evolved. But because I guess what I'm driving at is I think it's real easy as a new small business owner to sit here and listen to you talk about this and say, yeah, it makes perfect sense, right? But right now it's me, my wife, and one person. Yeah. Do we really need values? Do we really need a team meeting? Or I think there's this tendency to be like, yeah, one day we'll do all of that, but right now we're too small, it doesn't make sense. But we all know it's much harder to go back and implement things later, if it hasn't been kind of ingrained from the beginning.
So I think, in my opinion, it doesn't matter if you're one person team or 2 or 3 or 10 or 15. The foundations and the fundamentals of the business are the fundamentals of the business, regardless of what you're doing, right? you and your wife and that employee can have values and say, and in the values, say, we're going to take care of each other. We're going to take care of whatever it is. And values are evolving, right? Because one stage in your company, you're not the same today, and you're not the same when you're double the size or less the size. So
Yeah.
those are always being reviewed and evaluated. And when you get new people in, they come with new ideas because they're bringing stuff with them and stuff that we haven't thought about. I'm like, great, that's something to. We didn't put the values, like our values were on paper, but they were not as elaborate as they are now. But one of the values was family comes first, customer first, family first, and feedback. That was back then. It was as simple as that. Now it's a little more elaborate. Under each one has more lines on it.
To me, it makes sense that, you know, naturally it would evolve like that. But I think the big point is you guys started with something, right?
Yes.
You didn't say, oh, we're not big enough for that yet. We'll do that later.
So anybody who's starting out, it could be one person show. I would say business plan. It could be one page. It doesn't have to be this 15, 20 page. It could be one page. Here's what I'm doing. Here's my customer. Here's my marketing plan. Here's how much I think I'm going to make. Right? Just a business plan. Very, very straightforward. 1 or 2 pages. It's just like to get things off your head and put them on paper is a pretty powerful exercise to do. And Jeff always says, and even back at Capital One, like, put it on paper. Put it on paper, come back. Put it on paper, come back. Because when you talk about it, it's great. But when you start writing it or typing it, it becomes real, right? It's real.
Definitely. And it also starts to make it more of a business, right? And now, as you document more, as you have more actual systems and processes in place, no one person is irreplaceable. Do you know Bedros Keuilian? He's Armenian. He's the founder and CEO of Fit Body Boot Camp. He's got a book called Man Up. Anyway, he's a big social media, you know, presence, but, you know, pretty accomplished business guy. But anyways, I was listening to his book not that long ago, and he's telling the story about how they built Fit Body Boot Camp, and it kind of made me laugh because he was talking about how they didn't do a good job of documenting anything in the beginning, and they finally realized, hey, we should have been doing this all along. But they called it I'm going to forget exactly what it was, but it was the alien abduction handbook is what they called, you know, this manual that they were putting together, because it was basically like, hey, if any one of us gets abducted by an alien, you know, someone needs to be able to jump in and figure out how to pick up the reins for that person.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point, right? Jeff and I were talking about it the other day. Is like we need to do a much better job of documenting your processes and procedures for our closet business. Shelf Genie is pretty much done because it's helped out by the franchise. Carpet, we have a general manager there who did it. The closet business now, it needs it. So we're at that point where we're going to have to spend some time this year to document all that. I mean, but it's simpler than that too, Wes, though. I think, like, even a 1-man or 2-man or 3-man show, right? It could be, you should have a strategy, right?
Yeah.
You should have an actual document that says my strategy is XYZ, right? And then have a time, I'm going to revisit the strategy in 6 months, in 12 months. Or if you're more than one person, we're going to have a quarterly strategy meeting. And that meeting could be like, hey, we're on track, right? Or we're not. What are we going to do? And what do we want to try? What do we not? So I think it's the discipline of actually doing those things and setting the calendar time and actually not being interrupted and distracted by other things, and really focusing on the task at hand. I mean, Jeff and I, we're not perfect at it, but we've done a pretty good job of it, I think, over the years. Of definitely every December we meet and reevaluate the entire year on multiple levels, on tax and strategy of each vertical, each business for the following year, personnel, blah, 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 all that stuff. And then Q1, we do the same thing. Q3, we do the same thing. And then we have our one-offs where we meet, talk about hey, are we in the right direction? Are margins correct? What do we think we should shift? So regardless of your size, I think having those disciplines in and deciding not to do it is okay, but having the discipline and having to say, okay, on January 1, I'm going to have this meeting or I'm going to have this output, and then renegotiating with yourself is fine, but the thought of doing that is important, I think.
No, I agree. I think, have some goals, right? Even if it's as simple as, hey, we want to build an $8 to $10 million home improvement business, right? Have something that you're working towards, right? Especially if there's more than one person involved, right? So at least you're both working in the same general direction. Have some values, document things. It doesn't have to be perfect. What you start with doesn't have to be what you end with. But have something versus just kind of winging it. And I know that sounds real common sense, but I mean, how many times have you and I both seen, like, just through Shelf Genie, how many people totally winging it? And that's in a franchise where a lot of it's already
right. I mean,
there,
it's most
right?
businesses. Joe West is most businesses. We owned, my brothers and I owned a pizza shop before jumping into, and even maybe during when I started, during when I started Shelf Genie, we owned another business. And if you don't bring structure to it, like my brother was running it, and I'd be all the numbers guy, right? I'd walk in, I'm like, okay, what's our margin? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, you keep selling something. How do you know it's making you money? What if you're losing money at what you're selling? So you're thinking, great, I sold 50 of these, but you just lost 50 times the dollar.
Yeah. We sold twice as many pizzas as we did last night. Great. We lost twice as much money tonight as we did last night.
If you don't know,
yeah.
And if you don't have the discipline to say, okay, I'm going to visit our margins every week, especially in a business like that where your margins fluctuate because what you're buying things at fluctuate. You can't change the price every week, right? But when the time comes to do it, you can, have more data to say, okay, I'm going to, instead of raising a quarter, I'm going to raise it 35%, 35 cents, 39 cents to make sure that I hedge for fluctuations in price.
Yeah, it's all that's so important. I like I said, I know it sounds common sense, but it's worth kind of harping on that point because it's so often doesn't. And I mean, we've been guilty of that. I put a podcast out not that long ago, kind of detailing, our experience, Kelly and I, with a business partner plus an operating partner in this insulation franchise that we got into. And we did it for about 3 years, and it wasn't terrible, right? We didn't like lose a ton of money, but it didn't go nearly as well as we had hoped that it would either. And a lot of reasons for that, but lack of structure and lack of communication was a big part of it. And that goes back to pretty much the very inception of that business. So it's very important. If you're listening to this podcast, then there's a good chance that you're looking to create more freedom in your own life. There's also a good chance that you realize that owning your own business can be a great way to take more control of your livelihood and create more of that freedom that we're all looking for. Also, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you realize that I specialize in franchise ownership. In addition to owning franchise businesses myself, I have a franchise consulting firm, Path to Freedom, where I help people navigate what is typically an overwhelming process of understanding franchising, identifying specific franchise companies that could be a fit, and then conducting the due diligence in a thorough and efficient manner with those franchise brands. My whole purpose here is to leverage my experience working for franchisors, owning franchises myself, and how we've been able to use that to create more freedom in our lives and help you determine if that could be a path that makes sense for you as well. So if any of this sounds interesting, if you've considered business ownership in the past, whether you've explored franchising specifically or not, I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to learn more about you and what it is that you're working towards in your life and determine if I may be in a position to help. A great starting point is the link below in the show notes, which will take you to a short form to fill out, and you'll receive a free copy of an ebook that I've put together, The 7 Steps to Freedom Through Franchise Ownership. That'll also get us connected, and I'd love to set up an introductory call where I can explain a little bit more about the process that I use to help people determine if franchise ownership could be a great way to start charting their own path to freedom. So click the link below in the show notes, receive the ebook, and let's get connected. I'd love to hear from you. I want to kind of come back to, this conversation around to franchise or not to franchise, right? So you guys have at this point owned two different unique franchise companies, Shelf Genie and Cabinet Cures, which is cabinet refacing, right?
Yep.
All right. And your closet business is New England Closets. That's just you and Jeff. It's a dealership model, but essentially all that is the manufacturing and distribution side of it, right? You guys, it's your brand. You've, other than where you get the product from, you guys have kind of been responsible for building out every other phase of that business. And then the carpet and flooring business was an acquisition, correct? You guys purchased that from the original, I guess, founders and owners. So to me, this is really cool, and why I wanted to make sure we talk about it, because like you guys have tried a little bit of everything when it comes to, hey, what's the best way to start a business? I get asked this question all the time. To me, it's, one of those loaded questions. There's no one right answer. I think you mentioned earlier with a franchise, timing plays a big part in it. I think experience level plays a part in it. Like I can look back for Kelly and I and say, I'm glad our first, real foray into business ownership was a franchise, because it just gave us the ability to run faster. Like we gained confidence, we gained financial resources, we gained so much in a short period of time because, the playbook was there for us. All we had to do was take the ball and run with it. I have no doubt we could have figured it out and done well had we just started something on our own. But I think we were able to jump probably damn near a decade ahead, in like a 2 or 3 year period by doing that. So talk to me a little bit about what that's been like from you and Jeff's perspective, franchise, dealership, acquisition, pros, cons, all of that.
So we love Shelf Genie. We loved Shelf Genie as it was when we got into it because of everything we talked about a little while ago. We got into Cabinet Cures because that was two other Chef Genie franchises were doing Cabinet Cures, and we wanted to get into refacing, refinishing, and naturally to us is like, hey, more of us are doing the same thing. Let's do the same thing and get into it. That was a franchise, but it was not a really developed franchise, and nothing like what Shelf Genie offers to its franchisees. So our experience from a franchise perspective was a little different with our Cabinet Cures business. And then at that point, we had decided that we want to get into closets, but we don't want to do it under another franchise model. We knew definitely that it's not going to be a franchise model.
Because there's plenty of closet franchises out there.
Correct, there are, and we just didn't want to do it that way. We wanted to go in independent, and we did it. We had to find the right partner for the manufacturer. We went through like a year of R&D, you want to call it, and until we found the right source for us, and which worked out pretty well for us in Philadelphia. And it kind of killed two birds with one stone, because we were running the Shelf Genie Philadelphia territory, and these guys are our manufacturer for closets in Montgomeryville, Pennsylvania. So it kind of, whenever we went down to meet the Shelf Genie team, we met with these guys too. So it kind of killed two birds with one stone. It was pretty good.
That makes sense.
Completely different dynamic starting something on your own. I mean, to the point where, what's your logo, right? Like, what color is your logo? What does your logo say? What's the tagline? What's your business card look like? What's your truck wrap look like? And just countless.
Even like, what CRM system are we going to use? How are we going to deliver?
Exactly.
That stuff's pretty turnkey in a franchise, and I'm not arguing franchise over dealership. And I've said this many times on this podcast, like I'm not, just because I'm so ingrained in franchising right now in my work, I'm not ever saying that a franchise is the only way to go or the best way to go.
Yeah, 100%.
So many variables involved, but one of the things when people look at the initial fees you pay to get into a franchise, they think that's just like a sunk cost, when it's in reality, I mean, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure Jeff, could pull up a spreadsheet somewhere to look at like everything you spent on the closet business just to get to the point of being ready to start operating.
Oh yeah. I mean,
I would bet it's pretty darn close to.
It's I don't know about. It's close if you look at geographically, like if you strip away some of the stuff, you didn't have to buy the entire Shelf Genie territory. You could have started smaller. Then yes. There's a lot of hidden. Now the point is though, if we didn't have the Shelf Genie and the Cabinet Cures franchise, we wouldn't know what is good or what is bad on the dealership part. Right. Yeah. So we wouldn't know what to look for, or we wouldn't know the red flags, like, hey, this doesn't sound right. Or we already knew what a good CRM looked like, right? We already know what not having a CRM looks like. So, or from a marketing perspective, or from a cost perspective, or fees, we knew what the margins had to be. I'll give you a perfect example, right? Shelf Genie has closets, right?
Now,
yeah. We can't see us running closets with the same margins as we do.
I'm sure you can.
The margins are different, so there's a whole different margin thing because we're direct. Yes, there's a lot more heartache that I got to do. I got to figure everything out: the shirt, the color of the shirt, the brand of the shirt, where the logo goes, what the logo looks like. But again, going back to my point is, it's the stuff that you learned from what's good about and what's bad about franchises, then you take and pick from and say, hey, let me mold my company this way.
Well, not only that, but also like, now fast forward, 8-9 years, however long you guys have had the closet business, you've done the heavy lifting in terms of laying that foundation. So now day to day, it's probably no different than running your Shelf Genie business, but you don't have the negatives that come with a franchise in terms of royalties and
correct
things of that nature, right? So
it's like tape now and some of that stuff.
There's a short-term maybe sacrifice because you are putting in more work and figuring more out, but maybe more long-term benefit once you're successful. And to me, it's one of those things that comes back. It's not even a fair question to say like, oh, is a franchise better than a dealership? It's all based on the individual, their experience, where they're at, what they're looking to get out of it.
100%.
There's so many variables.
The situation, the macroeconomic environment, like the type of business, the industry. It's a, like, for example, right? I would not go into a flooring franchise because that was one of the opportunities we had. I much rather do what we're doing now and have more control of what we're doing versus the flooring franchise. And just to segue into why we bought the carpet and flooring store, because it's not like one morning I woke up and said, I want to get into carpet and flooring. It's actually, no, I don't. That's not a very appealing business if you're not into it. However, if you peel back the layers, we knew we wanted to get out of refacing, refinishing, because it was a very tasking, demanding business the way we did it, right? The way we did it was very tasking and demanding. However, once we got out of that business, we wanted to make sure we replenish our income and our revenue. So before we completely gave that up or shut it down or sold it or whatever we were going to do with it, we had to figure out another way. And Jeff's great, and he has a lot of screen time, computer time. He's always thinking 6 months, a year and a half ahead. Where are we go? What are we going to do today to make sure we hit our 8 to 10 million in 2 years from now, right? So
Yeah.
Because that decision has to be done today. Right? It's got to be done today because, but you know better than anybody else. If you say I want to buy or get into a business, you're 2 years away, year and
Yeah.
a half away,
Yep.
unless you get lucky. So he
Same thing
has
if you
said,
want to sell a business, right?
if
Like,
you want to sell it, and if you may not even be able to sell it. So uh, we found this guy, and a lot of things were lined up, and he was in business for 30 years, had a really nice niche floor carpet and flooring business, did $0 in marketing, and did over $1 million in business. So it was all repeats, all repeats, all repeats, all referrals. But it was a family business, so you know you're going to take a hit because once he leaves, his wife's leave, then people are not going to be as loyal to us. But we went in there with saying, hey, the customer base is the same, right? They're getting carpets and flooring and things like that for their home, and their home looks like the same home we do closets in, we do shelf genie in, and it's in a really nice affluent area where shelf genie does very well at, and closets does very well at. And by the way, they have a really nice third of the showroom that can be a beautiful, beautiful closet and shelf genie showroom. That was the vision when we got into it, and we executed on that, and that was an appealing. No, the carpet business is much tougher business, right? It's got a physical location.
yeah,
You have open and close hours. You have to
more overhead.
man hours. You have to have retail counter associates because people walk in. They can walk in six of them at a time. They can walk in one at a time. So you have to be ready to. It's a different business, 100% different business.
Very different. It's not appointment based.
Yeah,
It's more retail.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that was the appealing part to us. It wasn't like, oh, wow, flooring, carpet. But the appealing part was, I think we can leverage our existing customer base to cross sell products to. I think we can attract new people to come to the store for either any of the products. And I think we have a more compelling value proposition if we decide to hire a business development manager to say, hey, I would like you to go and just knock on every 55 plus community development and just knock on and say, I have 3 product lines. I know you need carpets. I know you need flooring. I know you need you can use shelf genie, and I know you can use closets. So, and if you have the right person knocking on the right doors,
Yeah.
you should be able to generate a tremendous amount of business with the 3 product lines.
When once someone's done business with you for one of those product lines and had a good experience, they may not need all 3 things from you at the same time, but they're coming back to you the next time they need one of the
Correct.
product lines. They're
Yep.
telling their friends about you. So to me, it's interesting to, hear you talk about why you guys kind of wanted to go in this direction, complementary products, the advantages of that, and then that you've actually been able to execute on it. Because it's one thing to have the ideas and the vision, right? Totally another thing to execute on it. So I guess what I want to know, like, what have been the biggest surprises and challenges to actually execute? And I'm sure, plenty of room to get better. The flooring business you guys acquired, what, 2020? So you're still relatively early, into that compared to how long you've had your other businesses. So, but like, what have been some of the more surprising aspects of making that vision become a reality?
So I look at it, and we look at the businesses as completely separate verticals because they're all different. They're all different marketing, and like, so Shelf Genie, surprising, was in our pro forma 13, 14 years ago. The vision was that today we'd be a $2 to $3 million a year shelf producing company that was doing 50, 60% referrals and repeats. I mean, I'm sure that's similar to you guys too. But that's one thing, the surprising and the drawback and the cost of marketing of that business is still surprising to us. Generating new leads, new sources of leads. So that's one. For the carpet store, nothing majorly surprising, but I think the challenging thing was we're 16, so 7 years into it. We don't have a CRM system, believe it or not. My big project for this year is to have a CRM system for that business. We are on, we have a CRM system, but we don't really use it that much. We only use it to put leads in, but there's no talking back end, front end inventory. So the big goal is, because we're big boys now, for us, we have to transition to a more better way of tracking everything. And to be honest with you, if we're building this business to one day be attractive to somebody to come in and buy us, we have to have all our ducks in a row, and that takes 2-3 years to actually do it, implement it, and get it in. And the other one for the closet business has been, I think, growing that has not been that's just the lever. I think because there's enough leads and enough demand out there. Finding finding people and finding help is the bigger challenge for that business. Good, solid help.
So then bring it all together. Has there been any challenges that you didn't anticipate when it comes to, actually leveraging the fact that all of these businesses have a similar client base, right? And have you been able to actually, execute on cross-training, employees to work across multiple businesses? Like, has some of that started to play out, or has that been more challenging than you guys anticipated? Like, what does that part of it kind of look like?
So I'm going to answer that in a couple of ways, because it's a little different. So from the beginning, Jeff and I made a decision that we are not going to cross individuals between businesses. They can help each other.
Okay.
Because we wanted to say, if somebody calls us for Shelf Genie, we want to give them the Shelf Genie experience. We want to give them all Shelf Genie, everything Shelf Genie. Closet, same thing. Carpet, same thing.
That makes sense to me.
But that doesn't mean that once in a while, more on the production side, if
behind the scenes,
hey, can you go help this guy out? But it wasn't like Shelf Genie guys are also installing half the time closets, or closets guys installing. And I think the way I'm approaching it is proper, because they're really good at their tasks. Like they're
more efficient.
Second you start crossing them, it will be thing. The thing that has worked. So we haven't done a lot of the crossing. The thing that has worked is, although our carpet business we're disappointed in its results in 2023, because in 21, so in 20 we bought it, 21 we kind of like dabbled in it, learn it. 22 was a big learn year, change year for us, put systems in, hire management, infrastructure, people, and showroom. We redid all that. And 23 was going to be, okay, bam, we're going to 10, 15, 20% growth. We actually stayed flat. So, and we kind of know why we did that. So we're kind of on it now. We're going to think, but the beauty of the carpet store is, now that we put the closet and Shelf Genie showroom in it, it changed everything for us. One, it made us a more, what's the right word? Tangible, number one. Reputable, number two, to potential designers who want to work with us as employees, potential designers that want to offer our products to their clients, and clients that are coming in. You're like, hey, come to the showroom. A client that envisioned only white closet with just bare minimums that walks into that showroom, now they're like, oh, I can have this, I can have that, I can have that, I can have this. And it's getting them to start visualizing and think, oh, I can have a mudroom, I can have a TV set, I can do this, I can do that in my house. So it has brought us a lot of credibility and a lot of clout, a lot of drive-by business, and that's why exactly what we're doing in this Woburn location is we're putting a showroom in the front. We're taking our old cabineters and our Shelf Genie showroom and making that a closet showroom. So that has been the beauty of it, because we've generated probably, and to us, Jeff and I had said, if we can generate a couple $100,000 worth of closet business through just walk-ins at the carpet store, even if the carpet store doesn't do tremendously well, it generated all that business for $0 in marketing, So
it's massive.
So I don't know if that kind of.
No, it does. It's interesting, and I think you bring up a good point. I mean, several good points, but I tend to. I think 3 years ago, I would have not necessarily agreed in not cross training employees, because if you're just kind of thinking about it, right, what I call boardroom strategy, it makes a lot of sense, right? But in the real world, executing, because we had an installation, like we had some strategic reasons for getting into the installation business. We didn't just pull that out of thin air. There was some, in our eyes, some synergy with Shelf Genie, and some of that proved out, right? Like we work with some very high-end custom home builders now via Shelf Genie, and for our closet side of Shelf Genie, that we got into because we were doing spray foam insulation for them, right? And that was the synergy that we kind of saw between those two businesses. But no way in hell am I sending one of my insulation guys to install a closet one day.
Yeah, I
right?
mean, there's a little
warehouse, they'd help each other out with some stuff, like, hey, we got a delivery coming, can you help unload pallets, that sort of thing. But
or one of my shelf closet installers used to be a Shelf Genie installer. So if there's a closet job that has a Shelf Genie component, he's getting that, right? So I'm not going to break that up. Or if my Shelf Genie installer has a job with the closet, he's going to get that. He knows how to install. But when you put them in as a day-to-day 50-50, it just, I think, which truck are they taking? Are they taking the, because they have it's just, it becomes messy in my head, and it's been working for us for now. So we'll probably stick with it the way we're doing it until it doesn't work.
Yeah, no, I think it's smart. Man, I could sit here and talk about this type of stuff with you for forever, but you've been very generous with your time already, and I have no doubt that anyone who listens to this, whether they're thinking about starting their own business at some point, whether they're already in business for themselves, ton of takeaways that they're going to get from it. As we wrap this up,
Sure.
what advice would you give to the person that's kind of thought about business ownership, and for whatever reason they're stuck? Maybe it's fear, right? Maybe it's fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of putting themselves out there. Maybe it's they don't feel like they have enough experience or enough capital yet. What advice would you give to someone that's kind of in that position right now?
You can get capital. We live in America. You can figure out how to get capital. I mean, look at my story. Look at how I've made it. You can figure out how to get capital. Jeff and I found a creative way to take all of our 401k money and turn it into an ERSOP and have the ERSOP buy shares in our company. So I could, without taking a penalty, we did that. So I'm not as concerned about capital if I'm doing it, even though it's a big monumental ask, but it's there. There's ways to solve that. I think the most important thing is, in my opinion, find something you can rally behind and be passionate about, right? Because I think that's very important. To get up in the morning every day, to have the energy and the with it all, to go out there, hit it again. If you don't like the product or the service that you're selling, it's not, you're going to find excuses and reasons not to do that exercise.
Yeah, it makes it easier to bail when things get tough if you're not really behind whatever it is you're doing. Because there will be, and I have this book sitting here where you can see it for a reason. I've kind of got that in the way right now, but The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster, I think it's a must read for any business owner, but it's a roller coaster, man. It's going to be, hopefully a lot of ups, but there will definitely be some downs. And if you're not really excited about what you're doing.
Number two, you got to do your homework. And that homework means you have to talk to people in that business, outside that business, right along. And you'll be surprised how many people in your network will be willing to offer their time to to share with you, show you if you ask.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I've still to this day blown away with how generous. I mean, look at you spending, almost 2 hours with me today. We talked for an hour and a half a couple weeks ago, just, kind of planning for this, right? I mean, people will open up and be willing to help, but I think that's another good point that you kind of touched on there, which is, yes, you want to find something that you're passionate about, but you got to do the research too and make sure that thing you're passionate about can actually be a profitable business. Like, don't just go do it because you're passionate about it, right? Like, I'm passionate about getting, shoulder massages for my wife, but like, I don't think that's going to be the next great business opportunity for me, right?
Well, that's my second bullet under do your homework, right? Is do your homework. It's like, make sure you understand the numbers, right?
Yeah.
That's you got to understand the numbers.
Yeah.
And you got to, again, not to be afraid to ask questions to people. And when you get into a business, or if you're thinking about, it's okay to surround yourself with advisors and peers and people who are more experts than you are at something, right? You don't have to do everything by yourself. It's very easy to outsource some things that are either you're not passionate about, or they don't appeal to you, or you're not great at. It's okay to outsource some of those things to get some help from other people. It's good to have a board of advisors, right? It's good to have a board of advisors to go once every 2 months to say, hey, we have one, Jeff and I have one. We have a private equity guy who was their friend, Bob, and he's been so gracious with his time to us over the years. And we always cross-check, hey, are we on the right path? Yep. Or, we should be careful of that. So it's very important to have people like that around you. And what we talked about before is have your check-ins, mental check-ins. Like, if you do get into the business, okay, every month I'm going to check the numbers. Every month I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to make decisions on it. So it's discipline, a lot of discipline. And a lot of that comes from, again, who you are and what you're doing. Like, if you're doing something exciting, then you're going to be so excited, motivated to do that thing. But if you're completely just doing it, I'll give you an example. My cousin wanted to get into business ownership, franchise or not. And he called me one day. He's like, I got this opportunity. I think I'm going to get into it. I go, what is it? It's X, Y, and Z. And he's like, I'm really good at marketing analysis. And if I can get into, I don't really like, or accounting. I think they're deficient in accounting. If I can go do the accounting, then I can make more money. I'm like, dude, but are you passionate about accounting? He goes, no. I'm like, then don't do it. I go,
you'll be miserable within 6 months.
Miserable within 6 months, and you're going to be like, naturally, you're not going to make money because you're not going to make the right decisions.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think that's really, really sound advice. And, I think your story is a really good example of that, because I tell people this all the time, right? Because I think sometimes we overthink things and we get paralysis by analysis, right? And the first business you get into, whether it's a franchise, whether it's a dealership, whether you acquire something, start it from scratch, whatever, doesn't have to be the last business that you start, does not have to be the only business that you get into. And kind of like I shared with Kelly and I, like, I'm so fortunate we pulled the trigger on Shelf Genie when we did. We had a million reasons not to, right? But it gave us some momentum, right? It hasn't been perfect. It's been really, really good for us, but certainly hasn't been perfect, but it gave us some momentum. And I think that, that can help with, starting to bring in money. That can, for us, it helped with confidence, right? Like, we have a lot of confidence in ourselves, largely I think because of the success we've had with.
And I think you nailed it on the head. The last point is, at some point, there's so much you can dip your toe into the water. You got to jump in at some point, and you got to.
Because you'll lose confidence if you get up to the line, but then you come back, and then you get up to the line again, and then you come back. Like, at some point, you're going to start losing confidence, and it actually gets harder and harder.
Wes, one thing that I'll say, the last thing I say, I know I've taken a lot of time, but one mind shift that I did in 4 or 5 years ago, and I think I've even shared this with you, like outside of here, I started looking at things as opportunities. versus things as negative. Again, if I go back to Capital One, when we had our performance evaluations, there was no weaknesses on it. It wasn't positives, strengths, and weaknesses. It was strengths and opportunities, right? Literally, that's how it was. Yeah. So that mindset, I 5-6 years ago, when we were having really downtime with cabinet cares, a lot of stuff was happening. I kind of had to shift my mentality because I was sinking mentally. Because if I was sinking mentally, then the ship is going to go.
Yeah.
So I had to switch and look at the positives and everything. And paralysis by analysis, you said, right? Mm-hmm. One of the shifts that I made was before, whenever I used to look at resumes, I would look for reasons not to hire somebody. Oh, he's too far. He doesn't drive. Blah, blah, blah. Now, when we look at resumes, we look for reasons to hire somebody, right? Let's find the one reason to hire somebody, or one reason to get into this business, one reason to call this customer, because then you never know, that opportunity can lead into something much bigger, because otherwise you would have just put that piece of paper on the left side as a no.
That's gold. That's gold. That's such a good, like, if someone just catches that from everything we've talked about today, like that's huge value right there. Not that everything else that you shared is not also valuable, but that's, and I don't know that I've ever really stopped and thought about that clearly. The biggest mindset shift I've ever made, and I've said this, numerous times on the podcast, is learning how to fear regret more than I fear failure. That was massive for me. Yeah. Right. Like, 9 times out of 10, and kind of go back to your story, right? What we're talking about here, living in America, starting businesses, maybe losing some money, maybe not making as much money as we wanted to make. Like, it's not life and death, right? What you grew up going through was life and death. What you overcame when you and your family moved here, essentially started over in a new country, learned the language, lost your father. I mean, all of that, like, that's real life. That's hard stuff, right?
Yeah.
Gives you some perspective that this is, I'm not saying it's not serious, but it's not the most serious thing.
Correct. And it's funny, we tie it with what we started with. What in my childhood has made me like, it's all this stuff's solvable, right?
Exactly.
So like, yeah, it's solvable.
I think that's what I was going at, is like 9 times out of 10, your failure, you can get back to where you were, right? Yeah. Like, you lose your life, like, you can't come back from that, right? But we're not really talking about life and death stuff here. And I'm not saying, to your point, like, do your research, like, don't blindly throw money into something. It's none of that, but it's just, redefine what failure is, and then also realize that, we all have this very finite amount of time. And I mean, how often do you hear stories of people on their deathbed, or, final thoughts before they leave this world, and they're talking about the things they wish they would have done 100%. Or done more of, right? Yep. So anyways, Raffi, you're the man. I love you, dude. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I know everyone who listens will. For those listening in the New England area, where can they learn more about your businesses? So Shelf Genie is, you get shelfgenie.com, Massachusetts, NewEnglandClosets.com, and CarpetCarousel.com. Cool. So those are the 3 businesses. And if anybody wants to reach out to me personally, they can feel free to do so. All right. We'll put links in the show notes so everyone can find that. But Raffi, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Man. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Take care.